Welcome to the Product Podcast, where we dive deep into the real world challenges and victories of product managers, startup founders, and product teams. I'm your host, Lee Jean, and in each episode, we have authentic conversations that uncover the hidden stories shaping modern product management. In today's episode, I chat with Aaron Bomar, who's a product manager and one of the organizers of Product Tank Tokyo. We discuss how he got into product management, as well as what he's trying to do to help build the community here in Tokyo. Hope you enjoy the episode. All right, Aaron, welcome
Hey,
on.
how's it going? Good evening.
Doing good, man. Welcome onto the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've been following Product Tank recently, and a little bit of, I think when I first met you, I think it was at the Musubi Tech event last year. I think you were
Hmm.
helping out
Hmm.
over there. But yeah, I love what you guys are doing with Product Tank. So, but before we get into that, what I'd love to hear from you is how you got into product management and a little bit about what's your story.
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Aaron. I'm a product manager. I've been doing this for about 3.5 years now. Uh, I actually was in a completely different field. So my background is also, I think you mentioned it was business. Mine is also international business. And I started my career in retail management. Then I went through moving to Japan. I did some English teaching. I worked in sales and recruitment. Um, and but when I first got interested in product management, I was just a couple years into Japan, and I had an idea for an app. And one of my good friends is working in Silicon Valley. And when I was speaking to him about the application idea, and he's a designer, and he was saying, why don't you play the role of a product manager on this project? And I was like, oh, what is that? Like, I've never heard of product management. So after that, I started looking into it, and I saw it as kind of the intersection between, business, but also technology. I've been into tech since I've been a kid. I was building computers for my family, gaming PCs, things like that. And then I studied business, so I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. So I'll start working my way to that. Um, but the way that I got into my specific role, if you've seen my background, which the last job I was working in was recruitment and sales. Um, I was doing hiring for clients in the tech space, like tech roles in financial services, consulting, and things like that. And one of my clients, who I did a lot of good work for, so I introduced a lot of candidates to this client,
Mhm.
and it was a tech company. And one day I had a good relationship with the HR guy because I had been introducing him all these candidates, and I just said, hey, do you have any, BA roles or product owner roles? And I was aiming for business analyst because if you aren't aware, like business analyst is kind of a good pathway into product management, where you deal with the user requirements, defining things like that. So basically, long story short, there was an opportunity for a team. I took a shot at applying. When I interviewed, I strategized that and I ended up passing. And so that's where I got into this current role. So I started as kind of a BAPO, and then afterwards I switched to product manager in my
That's
company.
awesome, man. That's a really cool journey, man. Like actually we have kind of similar backgrounds. I actually started off my career doing a little bit of sales and recruitment as well. So,
Oh,
and then
really?
transitioned into English teaching. So,
Yeah.
very interesting that you said that. And, as a founder, I think, that kind of really translates into being a product manager as well. Like they're very similar in
Mm,
that sense, right? So,
yeah.
how do you think your business background and the unique experience that you have has helped you in being a product manager?
Yeah. So, I think overall, my responsibility here is primarily internal tools. So I work on a platform, it's a B2B platform, but my responsibility is mainly to internal stakeholders. So from that point of view, I'm not doing a lot with the outside market. However, I do think that, being able to understand business helps you be able to understand other risks that might be associated with some decisions you make, right? So I was having a discussion with someone else about I don't want to get into too many specifics, but basically, a difficult decision that I had to make a year ago or so in my company. And it was, I had to not only weigh, development effort timelines, obviously, which PMs do on prioritizing features, but also business risk, right? Because if I choose option one versus option two, and we don't make it, there could be a significant business side risk, right?
Mm.
So understanding the business risk more, being able to interact with users in a way that is not only about the product, technical aspects of the product, um, but in general, product management, I can talk about some of the other things we've done, like JPC, a product tank. You want to understand the business side as well, because what you're doing fundamentally is working on the product. Yeah, that's great. But the only reason you're doing it is because you want to drive business impact, right? So ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that's why it's very important to understand that.
Well, yeah, absolutely, man. When I've spoken to a lot of product managers, some of them come from a technical background, but then, also some people come from the business background, right? So, when you got into that technical kind of environment, was there like a learning curve for you at all, or was it kind of easy to get into?
Absolutely, yes, there was. This is I work in my company is a bit chaotic, which is good and bad in some ways. But not only did I have to get used to just, working in a tech company and in an agile team, there's a large amount of stakeholders, and then also you have specific jargon or words from
Mm.
the industry or domain that you're in, right? So I had to learn all of that. So I would say probably 3 or 4 months. Yeah, it was a little bit tough, but I ramped up as quickly as I could.
That's great. That's great. That's great to hear, man. When I first started recruitment, it was tech recruitment. When I got hired, I was like, I know nothing about tech. And they're like, oh, don't worry. By talking to people,
Yeah,
talking to candidates, you learn everything. You learn all the
yeah,
lingo. And
yeah,
it's really true. You just learn by doing, right?
yeah.
And I think that's what makes product management so exciting, as well
Mm,
as entrepreneurship, right?
yeah,
Do
yeah.
you think it was a right career move for you?
So I would say that so far I would say I need more information. The reason is um, I don't know if this is going to be a pattern, but what I've felt in recent months is that, sometimes you enter a career and or you try something out and you might think, oh, this is not for me. Let's say you have a bad experience, the first experience, or you have an experience that's less than ideal. You might say, oh, this is not for me. Or perhaps just that first experience wasn't ideal for you, right? So I would say I'm satisfied. I enjoy the role. I think it's very challenging. Um,
Mm,
Sometimes I wish that I had a bit more kind of autonomy and leverage in
okay.
my particular role. But I also think that's a function of like the company that you work for. So like if you work at a small startup, being a PM is going to be a lot different than working in like a massive company where you might be siloed in certain ways and things like that. So need more information, and I'm sticking with it for now though.
That's good. Yeah. I heard it's very challenging. There's obviously tons of challenges that go with the role. You're communicating with different stakeholders, not just, internally, but in different departments and things like that. So it must be pretty hectic. What are, I guess, some of the biggest challenges that you have personally faced in your career? Yeah.
Okay. So things are, I kind of explained this a little bit earlier. So caveat, I'm a product manager, but as an internal PM, I'm not working as much on things like market research or, researching competitors outside the company, or,
Mm,
working on strategy in terms of like driving a certain revenue and things like that. So my responsibility is more on the cost reduction space, right?
mm.
How can we automate different workflows in order to reduce manual efforts and, save man hours per month and things like that. So I would say that in my particular role, I mean, I'm sure many other PMs out there will echo this, but it's always resources, right? No
Yeah.
one has enough resources. The engineering team, they don't have enough bandwidth, and you're always having to, prioritize, deprioritize, weigh different challenges. As I mentioned earlier, business risk versus, cost things like that. So I would say the most difficult thing is being able to persuade, right?
Yeah.
You have so many stakeholders and you have to persuade them. And many times these people might have conflicting goals, right? So they have a KPI, you have a KPI, and they might not sync. So like trying to find that win-win can sometimes be challenging, but I also think that's part of the what would you say, the satisfaction that you get when you do
Yeah.
succeed, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where sales skills come in, man, right? I think
Yeah.
really good PMs should study sales if they haven't had that experience already, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it definitely helps with persuasion and how to speak publicly. I'm sure during stand-up meetings or whatever presentations you're giving, right? It's
Yeah.
good to voice those concerns in a convincing way. Cool.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. I want to hear a little bit more about what you're doing with the product community, man. Like, we met at one of the events that you were hosting. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I'm currently organizing Product Tank Tokyo, and there's a couple other guys that I'm organizing with. We're a small team. The way I got into that was, actually when I joined my firm, it's a large company, and what I started to do was search for product managers on LinkedIn who also
Mm.
worked here. And it was a crazy story. I ended up finding one guy and I went downstairs to his floor and I met him. And that individual was like, hey, I'm actually quitting on Friday, but there's another guy who you might vibe with. And, and so he introduced me to him. And at the time it was Tanmay. So
Hmm.
some might know him out there, but he was the organizer of Product Tank Tokyo at the time.
Okay.
And so I asked him about the group. I was interested, and so I started joining, as an attendee. And he went off to follow his career in other ways, and he left the country. And after
Mm.
that, there was kind of a void, so there was one other person, and then there was another, he also left, and there was a void. And so there was no one at the time that was willing to kind of step up and
Mm.
organize for Product Tank Tokyo. And we're the largest product management kind of community in Japan. So I think we have over 2,000 members. There might be one
Oh, wow.
Japanese, yeah, over 2,000 now. And I think there might be one other Japanese product management community that rivals us, but we're the biggest in terms of international with like, foreigners and things
Oh,
like that.
cool. Did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's how I got involved. I kind of just, picked up the reins and got involved with the kind of wider organization because, Product Tank is a global organization. So we have regional PICs and also, global product tank. There are like 300 or almost 300 product tanks across the globe.
Oh,
So
cool. I didn't know that either. That's awesome.
yeah, like London, New York. So whenever you go to, any of these major cities, just look up Product Tank and maybe you can find an event. But
Nice.
yes.
Nice. So what is I guess the aim of Product Tank? Is it just to connect like product managers together, or is it to spark up business ideas, share insight stories? Like what currently happens during your events, things like that?
Yeah, right. So the mission of Product Tank is primarily it's a product management advocacy group. So all those things you mentioned can be involved in that, right? So we want to bring the community together, build awareness about product management, build passion, help create opportunities, networking between people. With me specifically in Product Tank Tokyo, we are a volunteer group.
Mm.
So obviously all of us have our own jobs and personal lives. But one thing that we want to do is we hold our monthly casual meeting. I think you've been there.
Yep.
Monthly casual, very, very low key, very casual. You can just drop by and say hello. We get probably about 50% new people like that attend and 50% of previous attendees. And so it's not only product managers as well, right? So even if you're a PM and you come, you might meet a founder, you might meet an engineer, you might meet an entrepreneur, or, someone looking for
Hmm.
a job. But yeah, I would say primarily my goal specifically with Product Tank is to continue building this community. And a few times a year, we want to have more specialized events. And these are events where we can provide knowledge and value and more of an interactive experience to our product management community here in Tokyo. So.
That's really exciting stuff, man. Especially for people like me who are very interested in the product industry, right? I'd
Mm.
love to know like some of the industry insights and I guess best practices, right, that other product managers are using in their organizations. Because my co-founders and I were trying to actually solve a problem for product managers. We've recently pivoted because of how crazy the role is, and like every single company is very different in terms of that. But I still find it super interesting because it's such a dynamic role, right? And you guys interact with design teams, dev teams, business side, right? Everything like that. So, super interesting the mix of people that come to these types of events, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why, I mean, I've met lawyers that have come, which is kind of weird. But there's one guy. Yeah, but I would say that kind of ties back into your previous question about what are some of the what's the benefit of having kind of a business background, right?
Mm,
Because not only do you have the communication, you have the more of it's kind of a wider breadth, I feel, of knowledge. Obviously someone can be very knowledgeable in a technical sense, but they might have trouble, communicating those ideas, right?
mm.
And I think in this field, if you can't communicate your ideas, if you can't paint a picture or tell a story, I think it might be very difficult, right? So, I mean, sometimes I'm working with engineers on a user story, or the other day I was, pitching a suggestion to a senior vice president, right? So it's very different. And
Mm.
you're asking for budgets. You're saying why you think we should, pick option three over option two, one or two, things like that. And so I think it's very important to have those skill sets. Yeah.
So for product take events, right? What types of, I guess, maybe workshops or future like talks or things like that, what types of topics do you think would be most beneficial for somebody who's interested in getting into product?
So someone who's interested in getting into product, I think so. We are currently kind of in the process of creating some surveys for our community to
Mm,
see how can we better provide value to our attendees, right? Um, so I would say for someone who's new and wants to enter into product, I think that's a great idea, which I'll take home. Maybe a specific event for that. What I'm been trying to do, maybe around the end of last year and what we were going to try to do going forward, is we want to also get more senior product managers involved. And so what happens is if you are a senior product manager, of course they want to give back to the community and they want to help the people, which are the types that you just mentioned, right? They want to join product and things like that. But we kind of started feeling that, and I've spoke to a few people that these senior product managers also want to learn from other senior product managers, right? And
mhm.
they want to build their own network for their career, right? They still want, have an ambition and want to kind of rise through the ranks. So I would say, to answer your question first, a themed event on product management kind of in at a high level, 30,000 feet view of product management, which maybe we can get into JPC later because that kind of is exactly what you're mentioning.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so in terms of product tank, while we're on that, the balance between helping people who want to get into product and also helping senior product managers find value, this is our plan for 2025, and we're working toward that.
Yeah, I'm super excited to attend some of your events, man.
Yeah, man.
It's definitely going to be interesting because the last one it was cool to just network, but I'd love to see some of those high level stuff that you're talking about. You have an event coming up on April 8th, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. So that event, I forget the exact name. I haven't looked at the event in a few weeks, but it's called, I think it's called Scaling Products and Communities. And that event is actually going to be quite interesting because um, Product Tank is an organization that was once under the umbrella of another organization called Mind the Product. And
Oh,
Mind the Product, they had Product Tank, but they also did, product training, product management trainings and seminars and things like that. All of this was under Mind the Product, right? And so Mind the Product was then sold to Pendo, which is a SaaS company. But the founders of Mind the Product, the original founders, are going to be the two speakers at this event on April
cool.
8th. Yeah, and so they've done some amazing things. You can see the event on Meetup, but I think one of the speakers has had, maybe one or two successful exits. They've both started companies, and one of them also is the creator of the Now, Next, Later roadmap, which is a pretty famous roadmap that's
Oh,
used by
cool.
product managers. So they'll be talking about, building companies, building products, and how they scaled the community. And one other interesting thing about this event is it's going to be an interactive event. So it's not really going to be just, PowerPoint and them talking at you, but we will prompt them and we'll have kind of a back and forth, kind of how you and I are speaking, right? But it'll be with
Mm.
the group. So it's free. Would love to see you there. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna go to that one, man. I really like interactive sessions as well. Some of my workshops and events, I always make them like very interactive because that's how people learn, right? You don't just learn from, the person speaking up, right? You can learn from other participants. You can learn by asking each other questions like that. It's really great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about JPC. For those who don't know, JPC means Japan Product Camp, right?
Yeah, yeah. So JPC, full disclosure, so I was one of the organizers, right? So there's, four or five other great, amazing people who helped organize the camp. But JPC was originally started by two individuals in 2022. And the idea was that, you know, they found through kind of looking at the market that there were many people, many students and young people that were interested in product management, but it was very hard to break into product management if you didn't already have experience with product, right?
Mm,
So it's kind of like the chicken and the egg problem. And so what they did was they decided to put together a camp, which it's kind of I think I forget how long it was last time. It was several weeks. And in this camp, the cohort, which is selected, has the opportunity to work on a real world problem, which is given by seasoned product managers, right? So over these several weeks, they attend two classes a week and they learn from other product people, people that are actually working at different companies. And they use these skills that they learn to build a prototype or an MVP of a product, the
mm,
solution to the challenge, right? And they present it. And so I attended product JPC number one as a student.
mm.
I was one of the older students, but I was just very interested in product and I wanted to, try it out. And I was able to get in. It's kind of there were many, many applicants and you have to be selected. And so
Mm.
basically what we did 2 years later, we took a 2 year there was a 2 year break and there was no plan to do JPC two. But I started speaking to a few of the other organizers and we started thinking, hey, why don't we do that again? Why don't we, see if there's interest? And we might modify the camp a little bit, but let's put out a poll. So we put out a survey. I mean, I think we got over 100, 150, people writing back that they were interested in doing this camp again. So we put our heads together and we kind of designed this camp. And so what I did is I helped find, the challengers. So for example, this year, 2024 or JPC 2024, we had three challengers from Amazon. One was from Amazon, one was from I think Paidy, and one was from Woven Planet. And what they did was they provided kind of a real world product challenge. And we had an 8 week camp this time. So two classes a week. So I went through my network and some of the other organizers did, and we found 16 instructors, right? And we thought of different themes that were involved in product. And we widened it a bit this time. So we delved into it, a little bit of engineering, we
Yeah.
delved into a little bit of design, and also obviously how to create an MVP, communication skills as we discussed. And we built this 16 class kind of 8 week camp. And it was amazing, man. I mean, I think we selected 24 people out of maybe almost 70 or 80 who applied.
Oh wow.
And yeah, it was really, really great. And I think we basically did some analysis at the end and some feedback metrics that we looked at. And we, over 4 stars out of five, right? 4.4 stars, I believe. People were satisfied with the camp. I think about 65 people, 65% of attendees were interested in continuing to, move on into product management roles. It was really, really great time. And so yeah, that was our,
Wow.
our way of giving back to the community. Yeah.
That sounds like a really great initiative, man. Is it still gonna go on this year or no?
So actually, I think I have a final meeting or one of the final meetings with the organizers tomorrow. We may or may not. I think I would say keep your eyes peeled on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. But we like I said, it was a nonprofit camp, by the way, right?
Okay.
So I think this time the camp was low cost, but it
Yeah.
was only to cover, things like the final party that we throw for the students or some merch that we provided.
Right.
Um, but everyone, it's always tough when you think about extracurricular activities because people have their job, their personal life, and
Hmm.
it was quite a lot of effort. But
Yeah,
I'm
it
glad we
sounds
did
like
it.
it. It
Yeah,
sounds like it. Well, that type of initiative, man, that's, where businesses start as well. Like this
yeah,
could potentially turn into something much bigger and much more impactful, right? Than being an individual contributor potentially. I don't know. I
yeah.
mean, it sounds like you had a lot of passion for it as well. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So I actually don't really know if I think I did mention this, but yeah, so I did have passion for it. That's why 2 years later, I decided, hey, why don't we join, or why don't I join and support as an organizer to
Mm,
see what I can do and how I can get involved here? Because the first time was so great as an attendee. Why don't I
yeah.
try to, give back? And I think it was an amazing
Well,
experience.
it's another what's it called? That it's another thing that you're doing with regards to Product Tank. You started as an attendee and then you're a host
Yeah,
now, right?
that's
Then
true.
attendee
That's true.
of JPC and now you're a host. So what's
Yeah.
next? I think you're a product manager now. You're gonna run your own company potentially.
Yeah, I think for me, I want to focus on some things in my personal life,
Mm,
going forward for a bit. I do want to continue with Product Tank. I think what's next for me is continuing in my career, maybe looking for some advancement there. In terms of outside of work, continuing with Product Tank. Hopefully, we can get some other people to help, organize because then we can do even more, right? Right now, there's
mm.
only a couple of us. So if maybe look for some more support there, throw some different events, maybe survey our community. And actually, this is kind of a plug, but if anyone watching this lives in the Kansai area, please do message me because we are looking to start a product tank in Osaka, Kyoto area.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Nice.
kind of looking for someone to be the organizer there. So, uh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have any of like those websites or links that people can contact you with, I'll definitely put them in the description. And yeah, the whole goal of this podcast really is to, let people know about product management and to help connect with people like you who are trying to build up the community and give the people education in
Yeah,
terms of how to get into it, right?
yeah, yeah,
I was speaking with another guest, I think, or I think I was watching a podcast where it was like they were talking about product and how nobody teaches this at school, right?
mm,
You don't get taught this type of education about, being a product manager, right?
yeah,
It's not a career choice that people have usually.
yeah,
They think about, they kind of just fall into it, whether they're,
yeah,
a developer, a designer, or like yourself, a business person, right?
yeah,
They
yeah.
just kind of end up in as a product manager. It's really great to have educational things like this to help people get up to speed, to get into the role and have that transition smooth.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, with JPC specifically, we even considered it we did not, we considered it a success if a person joined the camp and decided they don't want to be a product manager,
Hmm.
right? That's also valuable, right? Because,
Yeah.
maybe they thought, hey, I want to do this, but now we realize, yeah, this is not really for me. So, um, yeah, I love sharing information. You were a recruiter yourself, and I
Yeah.
agree with what you heard because I also felt that way, right? People would say, "Oh, Aaron, how do you know all this? Like, how do you know all this about, recruiting or even now, like about product?" Like, I don't know that I know that much. I just kind of, collect information and I like reading and building and doing things. And then I just, share that. And
Yeah,
so,
exactly. And
yeah,
actually, when you share it, you learn twice. That's why I always tell my students, once you learn something, teach it again because you learn it twice, right? And if anything, you learn it better because you're teaching it to someone else, right? You learn a little bit deeper,
yeah,
something. So that's great. And I think English teachers, right?
yeah,
We make really great, like communicators and like
yeah,
sharing knowledge is kind of in our DNA. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
So I
Hey,
definitely resonate with that. Yeah.
a quick question for you. I think did you mention that you're currently looking for product roles yourself or if in the market?
Yeah, yeah. So I was looking around, seeing what was out there, and I'm, trying to see like, is this potentially, a route that could be for me,
Mm,
but
mm, mm,
I'm
mm.
just passively at the moment. Yeah.
I see. The
Yeah.
reason I ask is I wanted to see, what your experience has been in Tokyo looking for product management roles. Like, how has that been for you? Because I have some thoughts there based on my recruitment experience and also based on what we've seen through JPC and some
Oh,
of their
really?
cohort members. So, how's your experience been there?
Not a lot of calls back. To be honest, my resume is not really like suited for product management, but yeah, I'm curious to see like some of the insights that you've had with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that what a lot of what I've heard is that in Tokyo, you have to be careful when you look at product management roles because it's still a relatively new field in Japan.
Mm,
Like I think it's probably been around, I don't know the year count, but maybe 10 years ago, maybe it started, popping up here. But a lot of product manager roles can end up being project manager roles.
ah,
That's one, possibility. Another is that the older staff who might be the managers in the organization, maybe they don't really know how to use a product manager properly.
mm, yep.
One person, I heard an anecdote. She came to our casual event and she mentioned that she was a product manager at a smaller company, but whenever she would try to share any insights or, perhaps some intuition or maybe some data shows that we should take option A, her manager would just say, we're not doing that. I already know what we need to do, so just, execute this. And she would say, why do you say that? And he's, oh, because I have 10 years of experience or 20 years of experience or something like that. So I think that also happens. Um, I think one big question, because one of the modules that we had in JPC, which we usually like to do at the end, is specifically on the job search, right?
Mm,
It's very interesting how we set up the camp, right? Because you get from the beginning to end, we kind of plan and organize the camp in a way so that you get the themes, and near the end, we start talking about communication, presentation, and also about resumes. And we have even a module with a recruiter, right? So a recruiter comes in, I think the last session, she just has a fireside chat about
oh, cool.
how to create your resume, how to look for a job, what's the market looking like right now. And some of the things that she mentioned were surrounding obviously language. That was a big one, right?
Hmm.
Like if you speak Japanese or not. And I would say that you definitely, there are roles out there where you do not have to speak Japanese and you can find them. I've
Hmm.
met several people that have them. To be honest, I don't know how they find them, but they are there.
Right.
Um, but they're definitely far and few between, I would say.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and they're usually at companies that are already pretty competitive to get into, like Paydi, for example, or something like that. Um, so I would say number one, definitely try to have Japanese if you have it. N2 is kind of what you'll know this, right? Being a recruiter. So N2, you kind of need to be kind of considered that you speak Japanese. Um, Even still practice your Japanese. I have N1 and it's still, sometimes a challenge, right? When you
Right.
talk to users. And the reason is it really makes sense to be honest, if you think about it, because if you want to be effective as a product manager, in my opinion, you need to be very close to your user and
Yeah.
really understand the user, right? And from that lens, you will help make all the other decisions you'll make, right? With the customer in mind,
Hmm.
at the top of mind for the company and for your product and, for the customer. And so in Japan, the customer is going to be Japanese, right? The vast majority
Hmm.
of the time. Sometimes you might get away with it if you deal mostly with engineers, but it can never hurt you to learn Japanese. So I would say that's the first point, or second point rather. The first point was watch out for product versus project management.
Yep.
Second point is the language, and third point I would say is make sure that you are mindful of cultural differences, right?
Mm,
Because they do exist. And that's not just with Japanese. So, for example, in my company, it's quite diverse. So I work with people from, China,
mm,
from India, from Japan, and there's always kind of this. I would say, you know, earlier we talked about different stakeholders, right? And how you juggle between sales and compliance and your users and things like that. I would say you have to do the same thing, but at a much more like background level with
mm,
culture, because very often, you know, even myself, I'm from the US. There might be some cultural cues that I throw off or some ways that I communicate with people And I might think it's fine and normal, but they might, low key be a little bit like, oh, like
Yes.
he's a little bit aggressive or something like
Yes.
that. So
Yeah.
that's also a good thing to keep in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Great resource about that is called The Culture Map. Have you read that book?
Oh, I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, The Culture Map is a good book in terms of identifying the differences between cross-cultural communication.
Mm,
Yeah, when I was in the Antler programs, one of the instructors told us about like how Japan is a super high context like
mm,
society,
mm.
and the US is very direct and like it's a lot different. So I could
Yeah.
definitely see some stuff happening there, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so crazy because, like I said, we are not, I'm not immune, right? I mean,
Hmm.
and the crazy thing about the cultural aspect, which it's very interesting, but it's also kind of like it's kind of like not, I don't want to say scary, but it's like it, it's like you don't even know that you're doing something. Like you just
Yeah.
think you're being
Yes.
yourself.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
it's
Yes.
like even harder to like be conscious of it. Yeah.
That's
So,
right. That's right. That is right. Yes. You know, it's crazy though. You know, here in Japan, you know, it's kind of frowned upon sometimes to be yourself. You kind of have to fit in some
mm,
places, right?
mm,
So
mm.
it's striking that balance because as Americans, we're very different, right? We want to
Yeah.
be unique. We want to be ourselves, but we are living in Japan, and we need
Yeah.
you know, come to some sort of middle ground. So, hey,
Yeah.
it's part of the perks of the job. You know, you learn a little bit about yourself, learn a little bit about the
Yeah.
world. It's great, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I guess one last thing I'll say about the jobs is I won't say names, but there's one person that I know in the market who's a senior PM, and
Okay.
he was telling me that he had struggles with what you just said, right? Like he's not from the US, but he's from another country, and he was saying that when he came into his role, he got into it with the COO a couple times because like he would say, we need to do this, here's what the data is showing us, but then they would say like, no, we're not doing that. And it was very top down. And he said someone approached him like, hey man, like you got to stop doing that because like that's not the way that this company works. And it was a Japanese company.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, I think he was in hot water a little bit, but,
Okay,
but
interesting.
yeah. So,
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. I know in the US, like we can just go right to the top and be like,
yeah,
hey, this is not working for this reason. There's a finding,
yeah,
blah, blah. But
yeah,
yeah, you don't do that here, all right? Whatever Sacho says goes, right? That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
My question for you, for a product manager,
Mhm.
who whose back do you have? Do you have the company's back or do you have the user's back?
This is a great question. This is a great question. And I think the answer is both. It has to be
Mm,
both, right? Because you're employed by the company, and I think you have a kind of a duty to, to the company, right? Um, you don't want to, there's always that balance of like, you don't want to upset the the golden goose, right, which is the customer, right? The customer is very important. They're obviously, I would say that if I was making a decision between my user and the company, like I said, I'm internal, so it's a bit different.
mm,
But if I imagine if I was working with external customers, you, it would be a very kind of fine line between how do we satisfy our customers, but also make sure that we have a positive business impact, or at least kind of a not negative business impact.
right,
So
exactly.
I would say you have to have both. I know that you might be looking for a more concrete black and white answer, but I would say it's got to be both. It might change too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think depending on the product that you're building, the situation, I think definitely it changes, right?
Right.
Um, so
Yeah.
follow-up question. Yes.
Before your follow-up,
Yeah.
if I could just add, I would think that for a larger company too, it might the scope might be so large that it's maybe my product has to take a hit so that a larger product that has more of an impact succeeds. Does that
Mm,
make sense what I'm
that
saying?
makes sense. Yes,
So
yes.
like, yeah, so maybe in that situation, like I would have to, say to my customer, hey, we're gonna have to upset you a little bit, or we won't be able to deliver this. But this greater, bigger, the greater good for the company overall will have a positive impact. So yeah, I just thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's lots of back and forth with the PM role because you are that middleman, right?
Yeah.
You're the you're the glue that
Yeah.
puts everything together. And
Yeah.
even this can go to the tech and the business side. Like
Yeah.
whose side are you on as well, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's very challenging. So, you know, in the US we have a saying, uh, the customer's always right.
Yeah.
As a product manager, do you believe that?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, yeah, for the most part. And the reason is, there's another, the story I told you earlier about my buddy in design. He has a similar saying. Apparently, where he was working, they would say, if a user doesn't know how to operate, or if a user can't complete a journey or a flow, then it's our fault as the designer, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's not like, at the very least, I think it's best to start from that premise, um, because what else is there, right? Like, how are we going to say if you're wrong, so they're not using my product properly, or I'm not making the sale, or I'm not getting whatever, what can we say? The value proposition is not being found by the customer, and oh, you're wrong. Okay, then they'll just go somewhere else, right? So I think
Right.
we always have to move from the kind of premise of the customer. What does the customer want? I believe the customer knows what's best because the customer is the market, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we work in a free market kind of capitalist environment. So if we don't serve our customer, I believe personally that another person will come with a better offering, right? So I think as a PM, it's my responsibility to know the customer, be close to them, and have a finger on the pulse, basically. Um, one thing I hear often is sometimes engineers will say, or I've seen online, like, oh, why do we even need the PM and things like that. And I think to your point earlier, I think it is about being the glue. And I think it is about knowing more than perhaps all the other separate stakeholders about the customer and the wider vision. And I also think that one other big benefit of having a PM that is good is that they allow the engineer to focus on the engineering work, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
If I'm an engineer, I don't want, yeah, maybe I could do PM work or go talk to customers, and maybe I do, but at my main job, I want to do engineering. That's why I chose to be an engineer, right? So I think those 3 points that I just mentioned, being the glue, knowing the customer, having your pulse on the market, um, allowing your team to do the main work that they want to do and kind of defending both the business side or the engineering side when needed. I think these are some of a few of the biggest merits of having a proper PM.
The PM is there so that the devs don't get emails from sales team directly. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I think that's why they're there, right?
yeah,
Just
yeah,
so that they can focus on the right things because, sales has their priorities of making their customers happy,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And they devs want to build the product, but then like somebody needs to prioritize, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
connect the dots the right
Emphasize.
way.
Yeah.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the customer, like you're saying, is very important.
Mm,
I've
mm,
heard sometimes though that usually the customer has no idea what they actually want. And
mm,
that's kind of
mm,
like
mm.
up to the entrepreneur or the PM to
Yeah,
figure that out. It's
yeah,
like, okay, this is the reason why you're having this problem. And
yeah,
it's kind of like our ideas as PMs or entrepreneurs to figure out the right solution to them.
yeah,
So yeah, I think to an extent, I think maybe the data shows,
yeah.
right?
I
Yeah.
think maybe I didn't understand your question fully, but yeah, so in that context, yes, you are right. So I will say when I say in my opinion the customer is always right, I mean that if I provide a solution and it turns out that it doesn't, give me I don't get the outcome that I'd like, or maybe it didn't perform well or things like that, then I would take that responsibility, right, as a
Mm.
PM. But I think what you're saying is like from the beginning, like before we even build anything. Yeah.
Ah, yes, yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I would
Absolutely.
say, yeah, yeah. So I would say in that sense, yeah, you are right, right? Because have you heard the famous quote where people say, Henry Ford? Have you heard of that quote?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. If I ask people whether they wanted, what did he say? Like a faster transportation, they would say I wanted a faster horse or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's what I was thinking of,
yeah,
whenever
yeah,
I hear the customer's always right, I'm like, yeah, it may be in certain contexts, but
yeah,
not, I think when you're building a novel solution for them or a brand new feature or something like that, they have no idea what they want, usually,
yeah,
for the most part, you know? But yeah, that's great insights, man. I think that, obviously you're, fairly new into the career, but I think that you've learned a lot these past couple of years. And by hosting JPC and then also Product Tank, you're also surrounded by really great people as well. And I'm looking forward to watching your career grow as well, man. I can't wait to go to that event coming up, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, and I'll send you some links over so that
Yeah.
anyone watching can also attend. We'd love to see you.
Absolutely. So we do have a closing tradition on this podcast where the last guest has left a question for you, and
Mm.
then you will leave a question for the next guest. Are you
Sure.
ready for that question now?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. So the question is, knowing what you know now about life in your career, w- if you could go back in time, would you go to college?
Mm. Yes. Um, I think the answer is yes. And I think knowing what I know now, I would make a lot more of that experience than I did. And what I mean by that is, I think one of the issues with college, in my opinion, is that when you're like 18, what is it like your brain doesn't fully develop until
Yeah.
25 or something
Yep.
like that?
Hmm.
Um, I think a lot of 18-year-olds don't really know what they want to do. They often hear, oh, go to college, it's better for you. So they just go there and they just take anything, right? And they don't really, I'm sure some people do, right? A small minority, though, my intuition tells me, is very focused. They know what they want to do. I want to do A, so I do
Hmm.
A, B, C like that. But I would say that most of my peers or the people that I saw at my school, they went to college because their parents told them that, you should go to college, and they took something that they thought would be fine, like even me with business, right? I mean, I went into business because my father was a businessman. And so I think a lot is caught, not taught. And so I would go back to college. I would really take it seriously, and I
Mm.
would try to squeeze, all the juice out of that, orange, right?
Yeah.
To really get the full experience. Yeah. And part of it was I was working as well, though. So I was kind of like, a commuter school. Like I would go to classes and I go to work.
Mm.
But I would do my best to make more out of it and really remember those
The
experience.
lessons. Yeah. Yeah. I had maybe a similar experience, man. I didn't take it seriously too much, and I wish I did because
Yeah.
I actually got into a really good management school,
Mm.
and I didn't remember anything about marketing, nothing about finance, anything like that. All stuff I need now, So
Yes. Yes.
I
Yes.
wish I would go back and take those classes seriously, but there is an argument for just getting into entrepreneurship right away as well. Some of the most successful people in this world,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
dropped out of college or they never even went.
Yeah. Yeah. Or a
They did.
trade even now, man. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. I think those people exist, and I think they're really outliers. I think it is possible to. I was talking to a friend about this, a slightly kind of similar, but same thing. He's doing freelance, right? And I would say that, like, yeah, you can do that, but I would say you have to be a certain type. You know what I mean? Like, you
Mm.
got to be even more locked in than the normal person. Like, if you want to be a straight entrepreneur right out of school, then you
Yeah.
have to be able to like time management, discipline, you're focused. But
Yeah.
for me, I was kind of just like, hanging out.
We're
So
18, man. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
No, actually, I don't know. Do you like space? Your background is the Earth and everything.
yeah, man. Yeah, I do. I do like space.
So for me, like I remember this vividly, right? I was like junior year or like senior year in high school, and
Mm,
I love space. I'm a huge space nut. I love like NASA, like
yeah,
galaxies, all that type. So my background is a black hole right now. So it's
yeah,
yeah, I really love it, right? So I was sitting there making this like life decision at
mm,
17 years old. No one was around me to give me this advice. I was like, should I study astronomy?
mm,
My passion at the time was astronomy,
yeah,
and go like have a career at NASA or business. And I
yeah,
was like, in that moment, I was like, well, I think business will be easier to get a job.
mm,
But
mm,
if I could go back, if I were to take the college route, I would go to astronomy. And
yeah.
I could be working for SpaceX right now, or like,
As
NASA or something, you
yeah,
know what I mean? Going into, space and stuff. So, it's such a hard decision, I think,
yeah,
for people. And if you don't have the right support group and stuff like that, like the wrong friends, you can go down really wrong routes and waste a lot of money, right?
yeah, yeah. And it's so crazy that you say that, man. We'll have to definitely catch up more about the astronomy thing because I had the same type of thought process as you, except earlier, right? I remember when I was in, like 12 or almost going to middle school, and I had the telescope and everything. And I remember I think I saw some information, or I looked up like how much do astronomers make or something like
Oh,
that.
really? Okay.
And I was like, oh my God, like I can't, like I was like, I have to do something else. And because I felt like I would never. like make enough money, which,
Yep.
I mean, you have people that do things like Everyday Astronaut or, these famous people that, have you seen his YouTube channel, Everyday Astronaut?
Oh no, I haven't. No, no, no.
Oh
I
yeah,
haven't.
look it up. You'll love it, man. He's gotten to like the SpaceX factory, Blue
Oh,
Origin
cool.
factory, and he's always doing like, space stuff. Yeah, Everyday Astronaut. But yeah, like there are people that get into a field and they really make something out of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
maybe Neil deGrasse Tyson or some of these guys. So I would say that being driven, I think, and consistent, that's kind of a big word. Those are probably more important traits than just going to college. And if
Yeah.
you can go to a good college and you have those, then you're gonna
You're
kill it.
set.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
You're set. And then like I don't think a lot of like these skills get taught to us. It's highly dependent on your upbringing. Like in school we don't get taught how to time manage, how to, do all these things. So I think yeah, I don't know. I wish the education system was different in the US and obviously around the world. So okay, cool, man. So now it's time for you to leave a question for the next guest.
If you could have any kind of superpower to realistically improve your daily life, what would it be? And it's got to be like, it can't be like, mind control or something crazy. But
Right.
if you could have any kind of a power that could, improve your daily life, what would it be? And yeah, how would you use it in your career?
Okay. I like that. I love
Kind
it.
of,
I love it. I love it. I love questions like that, man. As an English teacher, I always get really excited about the second conditional, the imaginary,
yeah.
like the imaginary thing because a lot of languages don't have it. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's really, really cool. Yeah, that's great,
Well,
man. Yeah.
all right.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
I really appreciate you coming on. I'm going to link all the things that you had mentioned, some of your events, also your LinkedIn profile if they want to connect with you. Is that all right?
Yeah,
Yep.
that's fine. That's
Yep.
fine. So I'll
Cool.
send you some information and we'll talk soon and hopefully you can come to our events.
Absolutely. Definitely will. Thanks so much, Aaron. Appreciate you.
Thank
Yes.
you.
That's a
Take care, man.
wrap for today's episode of the Product Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want to share your PM stories, challenges, struggles, or insights with us on a future episode, please get in touch with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to have you on and keep this conversation going. Until next time, happy building, everyone.